Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Encounter. So, we have, of course, this film being an Amazon Prime thing that you can go on. If you conveniently have Amazon Prime, you can go on to that and watch this movie absolutely for free. If you conveniently don't have that, you can go out of your way to also go into a number of apps that I've listed over a number of other reviews here. You can go on and see your way to a Google Play Store and be able to search the word movie apps. You can there, in fact, find an app called Play HD TV. Download that app. You'll be able to watch seemingly anything for free. You can also Google search a app called Letter C Movies, and so it's two words. It's one letter and two words all together. So you can be able to download that app also and be able to watch pretty much dang near anything. So going into this, when immediately I watch this movie, I have this kind of Marvel Moon Knight kind of thing going on with it, where if you guys don't know Marvel Moon Knight, because maybe you're not Marvel people, here's the conundrum we have in this story, where Moon Knight is to seemingly be a superhero, but then on the other end of things, maybe he's just crazy the whole entire time, and him breaking out of his mental hospital, him going on to supposedly protect the world, but maybe that's not really what he's doing. He's beating up people that he thinks that they're alligators and so on and so forth. And so really, when we look at like a Marvel Moon Knight, I can't help but kind of feel similar about this movie. Because in this movie, we have Malik, who is to assume that there might be a number of people that might be infected with parasites inside them. Or Malik might be crazy this whole entire time. And so really, we want like a true definitive answer here. And some people may feel like there is one, and some people may feel like there isn't. But at the end of this story, we really have a story that I think doesn't really go anywhere. Like, I don't feel it really... I don't think it, like, really picks up anywhere to me. Like, I just feel like it's a very, like, flat kind of film that, like, I was hoping for, like, it's seeming to go one way, and then you're like, no. Like, at the very last thing of it, we end up finding out the actual ending, definitively. Like, I was hoping... like, I've seen kind of a lot of films that are to seem like, okay, like this one movie's to go one way this whole entire time, and then we're swerved with something like, oh. And I was kind of hoping this was gonna go that same way. I thought we were gonna get swerved with a different answer. But it seems that this movie, like, it doesn't feel creative enough. It doesn't feel... it feels like I'm just kind of left kind of disappointed overall about this movie. And plus, also, this movie just feels like the movie, like, kin to me. Where we have this kind of one cool thing, but then we don't really do anything with it. We don't, like, escalate anything anywhere. And so it just becomes this kind of rando kind of film that, I don't know, it just doesn't really... it doesn't really, like, like wet my whistle, so to speak. So this is just kind of like a middle of the road kind of film. Like I would say that this movie is possibly just, it's interesting, but I wanted more. I wanted so much more than this movie could have given me, and it couldn't have been bothered. So, because it just basically, it's a road trip film, and that's all it is. And it's just a lot of like boring road trip stuff. But and then eventually, the more and more we go on in the film, I just get more and more disappointed uh, by wanting us to have like a definitive answer and everything like that. And but it feels like we do have one, even though we. Anyways, so I think that's all I want to say about Encounter. Let's go out of our way to go into that double 5 time territory. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, yeah, I think overall it was just kind of like meh about this film. Like, it's surprising how like massively popular this movie got. Also, maybe it's just another one of those like new release things. Like, I don't like. I think I saw like the trailer, and I don't think the trailer like won me over. We do have Misha Collins in this movie, if people know like the movie or the show Supernatural. And I was like, oh hey, Misha Collins is in here. Oh, what a coincidence! I just stumbled upon this film. So, speaking of the film, let's go into it. Let's just go into spoilers. So spoilers, everybody. Check this out on Amazon, and if you've already seen it, then we'll talk about it. So, in the very beginning of the film, we have a meteor supposedly land on to planet Earth, and that meteor is to infect all kinds of insects, and then those insects are to eat other insects, and so on and so forth. And so there's to be a mosquito that is to go and prick into somebody and leave a parasite to just get them infected with whatever this thing is. Aliens, whatever, what have you. So, we have Malik, who is at this hotel, and there seems to be a consistent thing around him where it's like there's swarms of bugs. And so, Malik is to spray himself with all of this bug spray, and then he's to go and take this Bible and smack all these bugs, and because they're just everywhere. Like, we have Malik, who is to basically pick the worst or the most disgusting places, and so Malik is to give letters to his sons, for like letters saying like, hey, like, I'm still in the fight, and so on and so forth. We find out Malik is some military marine of sorts, and so we have Malik, who is to have not told his sons that he was to be imprisoned, and so now Malik is back on parole. So we have both Jay and Bobby, who are to kind of go and like read this letter. We have all of a sudden Jay and Bobby's mother going and slapping her neck because she ended up getting a mosquito. And so, like, there's something about this film where they're like, because when we get further and further in this film, more and more giving you this like belief of something, to eventually kind of like further and further kind of like pull it away from you. We have Malik, who after Jay and Bobby are to go and eat their meal, and Jay is to tell his father uh, Dylan, it's like, well, uh, like something that forces Dylan to now tell him to go to his room. We have both the kids going to sleep, and so all of a sudden Malik in the middle of the night is to wake them up and tell them, hey guys, we're going on a road trip. Come with me to this road trip. And so I'm like, this is just like the movie Kin, the Dennis Quaid, uh, James Franco movie. It's not the exact same thing, but it's fairly similar. So, and I didn't even watch the whole movie of Kin, so it was just like, okay, this movie better like have something here. So Malik is having both Jay and Bobby in the middle of the night, like I said, going on this road trip, and so we don't see either Paya or Dylan, who I believe is both these people's parents, both of these kids. And so we don't really even have Malik having them pack or anything. It's just like, hey, like, let's go, let's leave for this road trip. And they're like, okay. This is like the middle of the night and they're just going on this road trip. And so like I was assuming that we were gonna eventually find like these kids' parents like brutally murdered or something like that, or we're gonna find out something, but it seemed like we didn't at all. Uh, like find them like the way we would have probably thought that we would have found them in this movie. That's what I really want to say here, because eventually we do see them later on, but still. So Malik is going on and taking his kids on this road trip. And so what ends up happening is Malik is to have this kind of cop car drive by, and Malik is telling both of his kids to get down. And so they're like, okay. So we have, of course, Malik telling his kids to spray themselves up and down with bug spray. And so they spray themselves up and down, and so like Malik is saying, like, yeah, it'll protect you. So we eventually have Malik, who gets pulled over by some police officer, like asking like where he's going, and because both Malik and his son went off to the side to go and pee because he really had to go, and Jay, who had to go and pee, was going through while Malik wasn't paying attention. He was going through Malik's stuff, and he was kind of thumbing through it and realizing it that his dad is like researching like these insects or these monsters or these whatever. And so Malik is like, hey, what are you looking through that stuff for? Like, give it back to me. So Jay is to get in the front seat, and so Jay is asking Malik, it's like, well, hey, like, why are you researching monsters? And so Malik is like, that's not monsters, it's parasites. Like they go and they're inside a bug, and uh, and then when they bite you or like do anything to you, they put a parasite into you, and then people lose control. Like people aren't themselves. And so Jay is like, okay, all right, well, I gotta go pee, so how about we go pee? So we all of a sudden have a police officer pulling off to see Malik, and Malik is to have a gun in his back part of his pants, and the sheriff is to go on, or this officer is to go on to find this gun here, and he's like, hopefully this isn't loaded, or otherwise you're gonna go to jail for a while. So Malik is saying like, hey, like, we're going on a road trip, like we're going on this trip, and this officer is like, well, that's good and all, but like this is like 3 in the morning. Like, why are you going on a trip in the middle of the night? That seems kind of weird. Like, shouldn't you have stopped somewhere? Like, don't you realize that you're like you should probably have kids out this late? And so Malik is eventually seeing the parasites, these infections in this guy's eyes. So eventually Malik goes and attacks this guy, and they wrestle over the gun, and shots are starting to get fired, and but this officer ends up getting like clocked and taken down, and so Malik is to go back into his car, and so they end up driving off. So we go on, and so within this movie, we consistently have Malik at one point or the other seeing people infected, even to the point of escalating to uh, seemingly seeing himself as infected. And so we have Malik, who is to continue to drive on this road and is to give his kids presents because he hasn't seen them in a very long time. And so one is to be some kind of like army doll, and the other is to be some kind of like sketchbook, I think. So Malik goes and tells his kids that they're driving to some base because it's safe. So Malik is continuing to drive to this base, and so we get further and further along here, and so eventually Malik is just starting to teach his like sons things. He's teaching them how to fire a gun. He's teaching them how to kind of like survey the land as like a military like person, and he's trying as much as possible to train them for kind of dealing with this new world. And here's the weird thing. Like this, for a person that's to be blurry about getting infected and all kinds of things, we have them kind of going outside a lot for stuff. But Malik is to say it's like, well, hey, if you have bug spray, you'll be safe. So, like, it's a shield. So, eventually Malik is to be called by Hattie, which is his parole officer, and so Hattie is calling Malik as like a checkup kind of thing of like, hey, like, where are you? Like, I thought you should be here and you're not. What's going on? So Hattie is consistently calling Malik and not really getting much of any answer. So Hattie goes on and is talking to this one detective who is to be Shepherd West. And so when Shepherd West is talking to Hattie, he's to mention that this guy is to have some like goofy title with him, and because the way of which that this guy is to be like had gone through the military and like all the things that have gotten to him in this point. And Hattie's like, well, I trusted this guy. Like, it feels like I have a good judge of character. And Shepard's like, well, you judged wrong with this guy. Because eventually, this guy is to escalate things to have it be that, like, this guy is dangerous. That we're probably going to eventually find this guy, like, killing everybody. He's going to leave a lot of dead bodies in his wake, kind of thing. And we're eventually going to even find that he's going to kill his own sons. Because, like, this is where this guy is going to escalate to because of how crazy he might be. So Hattie is doing her own kind of detective work trying to figure out about this case. So Hattie goes on and she's to meet another Marine operative where she, of course, to ask him about this guy. And the Marine said it's like, well, yeah, like him punching his superior out actually was really just justified. Like we were all just losing our minds at that freaking point because they had sent us out on too many missions. It was like 120 degrees out, and like all of us were just freaking tired at that point, like crazy tired. And so like they just kept sending us out, and we just couldn't take it anymore. And so yeah, like what happened does technically make sense. That like this guy was to reach a breaking point. So we have Hattie who's just like, well, like maybe this guy, like maybe there is something about this. So we go on and have these moments where Bobby is kind of putting his toy outside of the car, and we end up having Malik, who's telling me it's like, hey, like bring that toy in because if you drop it, like we're not gonna go back for it. Like this is like life or death here, and we can't have you just drop a toy out and like we're not gonna go back for it. So the kid purposely drops it, and so now Malik is just like, well, we're not gonna go back for it. So all of a sudden, Bobby is to go on and is to put his hands over his dad's eyes, and so like the car almost gets into an accident, and so Malik is like, you could have killed us just then. Like you realize that like how dire the situation is here, and you're going on uh and you're tossing a toy out of the car and this and so like yeah, because he's a young kid, he doesn't know any better. Also, we have Malik who's telling Jay, his oldest son, it's like, well, hey, like you can't be a kid anymore. You have to be an adult. Things are going on right now that you probably don't understand. So you need to like grow up. Like you can't be a kid right now. It's like, good God, like we have it to where both Jay and Bobby have legitimately no proof besides some research that Malik had done to really say a lot of bubkiss nothing. But Hattie was to also get from that Marine some letters that Malik had sent, having all of these like psychotic pictures that he was to draw, and basically like having these like warped like weird looking photos, and Hattie's like, oh my god, like this guy's fucking crazy. So Malik eventually is to go to some store, and both Jay and Bobby were kind of waiting in the car. All of a sudden, there's to be some homeless woman that gets closer and closer to the car, and both these kids freak out. And so Bobby runs out, and Jay runs in the store to tell his dad, it's like, hey, I lost my brother. And eventually, Bobby is in the store grabbing all this like bug spray and like heavily spraying himself. And again, we have like Malik kind of like mad at both of his kids because it's like you guys don't realize like how much like this is a world-ending situation here. like you have to be at your guard because you don't know when something's going to happen, and so on and so forth. So we eventually have Malik, who is to supposedly make it to this base, or assume that is to really be where he is to make it there. So we have Malik making it to this base to meet a guy named McKinley. And so by this time, we have like a police bulletin out for Malik, like saying like what kind of vehicle he has, like any number, like that he has two kids with him, so on and so forth. We find that both Dylan and Paya, uh, Jay and Bobby's other parents, are going and talking to these police people that uh, kind of Shepard is kind of like going and dealing with this whole ordeal, this whole kidnapping technically. So, like, we never definitively find out like where these parents were. Like, I guess they were just like out of frame or whatever. I don't know. It seems just kind of weird. Like, it would have been nice if we were told like, oh, they were tied up and what, but we didn't really find out. I don't think it said anywhere in the movie. So we go on and we have this McKinley character going on and is to tell Malik when he heads into this place after Malik is to see numerous bugs in this guy's place. Malik all of a sudden is to see this guy in the shadows with this gun, and this guy is to tell, of course, Malik. It's like, well, hey, like I don't know what you're doing here in my house, and like I know that you're wanted here, but like I'm not gonna go and turn you in because like I don't do anything for the government. So like if anything, if you want to just leave, you can go ahead and do that. But like so Malik is to be really interested in this guy's car. So basically Malik is to go through and get shot by this guy like in the chest, but then he goes and beats him up and clocks him up because this guy is just seemingly have bugs coming from his face. And so this guy gets beaten up and his car is taken. I don't think he takes the shotgun or the gun that this guy had. So Malik goes on and is to take this car and is to now drive off to where now we don't know. There is no definitive like answer for Malik here, and there is no real base. It's just this guy was to say that this base was to be safe, but there is no real base here. So we find out really at this part of the movie that Malik is just freaking crazy. That like this guy is to be consistently lying about things to the point of Jay just going like, you know what, I think I'm gonna have to call somebody to, because I just don't believe my father at this point. So Jay is calling Hattie, and because Jay is to see the number that's to be base on his father's phone, and he finds out that it's Hattie instead. And so Jay is to find out that his father was paroled and he was in jail. And so Jay is finding out the truth, that this guy is just a loon. So eventually Jay is to confront his dad about like him lying to him, like it's coming. So Jay is to realize that his dad is just, you're crazy. Crazy. We had Malik, who is to check his kids' eyes when he's to first meet them, like put a flashlight to their eyes to just kind of check to see if they're infected. I guess that's the telltale sign. So Malik is to start to drive, and Malik is saying like, "Hey, what an upgrade, right? Right, guys?" And so Jay is, of course, to see his dad's wound, and so Jay's just like, "Oh no, I'm fine." So now Malik is telling Jay, it's like, "Well, hey, I think this is the perfect opportunity for you to drive or learn how to drive." So Jay is now basically driving this car. And I'm like, wow, this is insane. So we now have Malik teaching his kid how to drive. And because, like, Malik is probably going to die here. So they end up going to some abandoned home. And Malik is just to sleep off his injury. But then when eventually he wakes up, he's going to bandage his injury and start taking this like little like beads out of his body from the shotgun. And so we end up having Malik realize that he is now infected. There's like things like swarming all over his body. And so he's like, oh my god, I'm infected now. Oh my god, I'm like, it's going to be soon that I'm going to turn into the infected. But then Malik goes to this diner, and we eventually have a point where Malik is to pretty much think that he is now crazy. And no, wait, we still have one moment here. So Malik is now at the house. We'll get to the diner later, but we have a whole like thing to go into here. So we have both Dwight and Kurt McKinley going finding their relative who had gotten beat up, and so they go on to, I guess, track down this guy's vehicle to find it, and so they make their way wearing these kind of like bulletproof vest things and so on and so forth to now have Malik kind of surrender this vehicle. And like there's a big massive shootout where there's kind of kids in the way, and we eventually have Malik going and seemingly shooting Kurt, and then eventually Dwight and Kurt end up getting handcuffed together, and Malik steals their car and drives off. And so I think that's when he says like, hey, what a major upgrade, right? uh, so we have them go to this diner, and so Malik is at some point telling his son that he might really be crazy, that he might really be seeing things. And so we have all the guys like go and get some food, and Jay and Bobby at one point are kind of doing their own grocery shopping. Like we have it where Jay is to give Bobby like, hey, here's like $10. Like go and buy all the food that you can with $10. And so Bobby just kind of gets the normal like kid food. He gets like candy bars, and he gets like fruit roll-ups, and it's like that's not really food. So Jay goes on as to get painkillers for his dad, and this pharmacist called Dexter is to get this $10 bill that this kid is to give him, and it has blood on it, and he's like, oh my god, like something's going wrong here, because the kid is to mention that his dad's hurt. It's like, well, how bad is he? It's like, oh, well, it's not that bad, he just needs painkillers, as we see blood on this $10 bill. So this guy Dexter is calling and reporting this bloody $10 bill, and so we have the kid who is now driving in this car, and the pharmacist comes back out and he's like, hey, you're not driving this car, are you, kid? And the kid's like, oh no, I'm not driving this car, like I'm just waiting for my brother. And so we eventually have it where like the pharmacist is kind of unsure about things, and so now we have both Jay and Bobby are heading back to their father, going and getting breakfast. I know at the very beginning of this, the very first breakfast they are to have, we have them eating pancakes with a bunch of syrup, and Bobby's like, oh, I can't really have syrup because it'll make me hyper. And so, like, Malik is just like, well, like, then get a ton of syrup. Like, who cares? Like, it's all good. So now we have this diner, and so we end up having Malik, who goes off to call his parolee, and he's to mention like, hey, I'm not going to prison again, but there's nowhere else for him to go, there's nowhere else for him to run. So we have Malik going and telling both of his kids that it's like, hey, like whatever you do, just kind of stay in this diner, and I'm gonna go back into like fighting, which basically means he's gonna go right back to prison. And so Malik is to tell his kids, it's like, well, hey, just stay in the diner and like eat as much ice cream as you want. Like, here's like all the money I have left, and you guys can just eat as much ice cream as you want. So Malik leaves in the car, and so Jay sneaks and goes and follows his father. And so the young kid ends up getting picked up by the police, Bobby, and so they end up tracking down Malik and forcing him to stop his car because there's nowhere else for him to go. And so Malik is to get out of the car, tempted to like have them possibly shoot him, because like all these guys are whipping out all these guns, and so Shepard is calling Malik, and Malik is like, hey, like you're technically directing all of these like guns at my son, like how about you put all your guns down? And so Shepard's like, well, hey, like, yeah, let's go and put all our guns down, but Malik, you have to give up your gun also. And Malik's like, no, I'm not doing that. So eventually what forcibly happens is Jay is to have this gun, but he doesn't have his finger on the trigger, and he pulls out of this car, and so Malik is now like running out of the car also, just like, hey, like hey guys, you want me, I like I'm what you want, like don't go and do anything for my with my son, just kind of like don't do anything. And so these officers have these like guns, and so eventually Malik is to try to get the gun away from his son. And so we eventually have both Malik and his son hugging, and like this is just kind of how this movie just kind of fades out to eventually not have us have like a definitive ending to this film, and or a definitive like, oh, like Malik was crazy and so he got the help that he needed to no longer think about all this parasite stuff. yada yada yada. Like there wasn't any, like they could have had us like some kind of clips just finally saying that Malik, yeah, was crazy and he was going to go and seek the help that he needed and whatever. I guess they're just like, no, we're just going to have this kind of ending that kind of doesn't really end the movie. Uh, but yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to say about Encounter. It's just kind of, but yeah. So hopefully, I got most of this stuff in here. Just very small events in this movie. There's just a lot of just driving. We had the one moment also where Malik was to tell his kids, it's like, well, hey, do you think I can get this car to 100? And so like Malik goes and really presses the gas hard because there's nobody around. And so they get the car all the way to 100 and they're like, yeah, like they're getting all excited. And so, because there's like nothing better to do, they just kind of mess around because there's nothing really to do for this Road trip film that just like there's nothing going on for most of it. So, with that said, I am gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. One thing that I forgot to mention before we head out here. Uh, there was this one spot in this movie that I completely forgot about until like we got here. So we had this one scene where both Malik and Jay were going into this cave, and because this like it doesn't feel important, but like to me it like it's one last real thing here that I completely spaced about. Malik and Jay were both kind of watching the skies. And so Malik was mentioning, like, hey man, did you see that meteor? And Jay's like, what meteor? And Malik is like, are you kidding me? Like, there's hundreds of them. Like, just see them all just kind of going on and like sprouting throughout like the like it's almost beautiful. And Jay is looking on and he sees nothing. And he's like, wow, okay. Um, but I think I wanted to just put this in there because I feel like it's an important scene that I completely forgot about. But like I'll kind of fuse it in here at the end of this to eventually just kind of like say that one bit of something that I forgot about. And I'm sure there's probably something else. But oh well, like I kind of felt like that was an important part to just kind of tip the scales of basically showcasing that this guy eventually is to have been crazy instead of actually just been a person that is to legitimately have the things that he is to say be 100% true. So with that said, bye everybody. Bye everybody.